Before we start the show, just a word from our sponsor, Undeniable Press. For all your screen printing needs, located in the Corktown district of Detroit, Michigan. If you ever need any t-shirts or any other little promo accessories, posters, or whatnot printed up for you, go to Undeniable Press. They're located, once again, in the Corktown district of Detroit, Michigan, and you can reach them at facebook.com/undeniablepressdetroit. And those same guys who do Undeniable Press also have a clothing line called 20 by 20 Apparel. It's very much wrestling themed, all sorts of nostalgic themes in regards to the history of wrestling. And you can go check out their clothing line at 20x20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. Now let's start the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those? You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it them all. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. Until I'm running out of breath, or tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. This is episode 82, and we have a great guest for you. This week's guest is the Los Angeles-based soul music artist, musician, and producer, Cy Smith. I first met Cy many years ago when I was opening one of the foreign exchange shows that I was talking about with Nicolay on a previous episode. She was on tour as one of the singers with the touring foreign exchange band. As an artist who has been on the independent grind for a while now, we chat about what it takes to be an independent musician when the music industry changes so much, and she gives some great advice on how to swim through those sometimes turbulent waters. And then we also talk about what went into the writing and recording process for her newest album, Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete. It was a great chat with Cy Smith, so let's get on to that interview. I think me and you have met before. What year did you go on, you were on tour with Foreign Exchange?
I started in 2010 with them.
Okay.
May of 2010, and kind of ran around with them for probably 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so I think probably like the 2011 show probably in Detroit.
Yep.
Because I was the opening DJ for that.
Okay. Was
Yeah.
that, wait, in Detroit at Shane Park?
No, at the Magic Stick.
Oh, I don't remember then. I don't remember the place.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I wasn't there. It just means
you might have been at that show. I think the 2011 one, or maybe even the 2013 one. I'm not sure, but yeah, like their past 3 big shows that they put on here in Detroit. Like I was like the opening DJ.
Oh, that's dope. Super dope.
Yeah, so so I always have, and I even know Nicolay back in the day when I was doing my doing a website back in the day called Renaissance Soul. So he's an old friend of mine.
Okay.
But
Very cool.
Yeah, it's good to catch up with you. Your new album, Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete, is it's such a good album. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate that.
What's cool about this album is that I feel like there's all these great, just soulful melodies, but there's this range where it's like there's serious topics, but then there's some humor in it. It goes, across the board. What was sort of your idea going into making this album about, where you wanted to go with it?
You know what, Kelly? I don't know that I had an idea, thematically, I usually just take albums song by song. And so it wasn't until, like I'm always writing songs and recording. I'm always writing and recording.
Right.
So maybe back in 2015, I was writing and recording and just kind of experimenting with some different sort of sounds and sort of experimenting with producing myself, just to see what that would feel like. And maybe about 3 or 4 songs in, I wrote Sometimes the Rose Will Grow in Concrete, the title track, and demoed that. And it was during that time, it was like when I wrote that song and demoed it, that was kind of when I said, oh my gosh, I think this is going to be sort of the driving force behind the album. Now, I don't know if that meant, the theme of the album, but I just knew that song felt like like the beginning of an album to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the rest of the songs, as they sort of came into being, I think I just didn't really edit myself as far as topics went or themes. I just kind of let songs happen, and then at the end figured out if they belonged on the project or not. You know what I mean?
When you
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of fall into that song that you write and record that becomes that sort of centerpiece for the project, what sort of feeling comes over you at that time? Is there something that like kind of clicks when when you get done with that track that you're being like, yo, this is the one?
You just get, for me, I just kind of got a tingling, it's just a little tingling in my brain, like that just said, yeah, there's something really special about this. Even when it was unfinished, because at the time, I hadn't finished it. It was just a demo. It was just me playing the piano to a click and singing it. So all of the things that you hear weren't even there, but even in its phase, even in its demo stage, it still felt really special to me, and I don't know what that is, I think every person has their own sort of, definition of what special means to them, or their own sort of, feeling that they get. Some people might get a tingling sensation, some people might get a headache. I don't know. But I just knew even in its demo stage that it felt really special. You know what I mean? And even today, like even when I listen to it still, that song still feels really, really, really special to me.
Was there anything on this album that you did differently than your previous projects?
Man, I did everything differently. Because this was the first time that I produced a whole record by myself, so this was the first time that you really hear me playing a lot, Usually I don't play a lot, and honestly, because I know so many fantastic musicians that it feels weird for me to play when I could just call up James Poyser or somebody. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but this was, for the first time, I really wanted to be able to sit at the piano and play my whole album if I wanted to. You know what I mean? So I felt like this album needs to be written by me sitting at the piano, just writing songs. And so that's what I did. And I have never done that with my previous projects.
Did you have any sort of fears going into doing it that way?
Hell yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, because I had never really done that role by myself. I kind of thought I could do it. I kind of knew I could do it, but nothing tells you can do something until you actually do it. And then even after you do it, you still have to put it out there, and you're vulnerable to criticism. And so I was quite frankly, sort of hesitant. Like, I was like, oh God, what are people gonna say? You know what I mean? Like, people might be like, why didn't she just call up so and so? You know, but at the end of the day, I think my job as an artist is to push through reluctancy and to push through hesitation and just get things done, you know? Yeah.
When you're kind of going this route, is there any sort of inner, trials and tribulations and inner sort of reluctancy that you have to be able to conquer, and how were you able to do so?
Well, that was it. It was really just my own sort of brain, my own mind sort of giving me hesitation. But the musicians that I work with and my engineer, especially my engineer, they all made for an environment for me to like create without fear, And I think it's really important, especially for me, but probably for most creative people, to surround themselves with people who are positive. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really simple concept, but you'd be surprised how many people keep negativity around them and don't realize, like, dude, you need to like get that person out of your life because you're never going to get anything done. So my relationship with my engineer makes for an environment, where I can basically try all kinds of stuff and he won't look at me like I have three heads,
When you're sort of in that role where you're writing everything for the album and you're basically the boss of the project, and you're surrounding yourselves with all of these great musicians to be able to, bring out your vision of this project. How do you stay on top of things and not sort of succumb to, maybe just even some of the outer ideas that maybe other people have, or even they think that you might think they might have for this project? How do you stay on top of everything?
Well, when I had musicians come in to play something, for instance, like I would have a guitar player named Jairus Mosey come in. Jairus, like, he knows, like, when I call a musician in, it's because I like what they do, right? So I already want, whoever that person is, I already want their signature in the piece. So I got to give them the freedom to be themselves within a framework that I've created, Yeah. So part of being a producer is sort of knowing who to call for what song and then trusting that person's ability to color in a frame that you've created, I don't like to micromanage notes. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'll basically give a framework or, play a bass line on the keyboard and say, this is how the bass line goes, and then let them interpret it. And then if they stray too far, I'll just rein them in a little bit. It's not that difficult, I don't think. And like I said, the guys who I call, like, they know me, and I think they respect my musicianship enough to do the things that I'm asking, and they all seem to have a lot of fun with it. That's another thing. Like, when you look at the musicians you're working with, and you can see that they're having fun, then you're doing some good work. You know what I mean?
Right, definitely.
Yeah. So, like, I might have a guitar player come in and lay down 3 or 4 passes, and then, send them home, and then I'll pick and choose and do all kinds of stuff with what they've done. But yeah, it's really just about calling in cats that I know and cats that I know respect me,
When you were starting this project, what was probably the first thing that you did in writing this album? Do you remember that, like, the first step going into making this album?
Yeah, like I said, the title track was definitely the first song where I said, "Oh my God, this is going to be the album." But it took me, this album took me like 2.5 years to record. So I think maybe the second song I wrote was probably Perspective, and the third song might have been Now and Later. And it was like I would write a song, go in the studio, demo it, and then I would leave to go on the road. And I would, and so a lot of these songs were like marinating over months before I would come back and finish them. You know what I mean? Which was another different thing for me. Usually when I record, I just do the whole song and finish it up and mix it all at the same day. You know what I mean? But for this album, I was really marinating on ideas for a long time, and not because I wanted to, but because I had to. But I think it made for a really, let me see. I think it made this project feel a little more mature than any of my other projects because of that, because the songs literally had to sit and ferment,
With kind of going this route where you're just sort of forced to marinate on the material, did that help with any of the fears that you originally had with going in all in by yourself with this album?
I don't know if it helped with any of the fears, but it definitely made my patience get better, because I was not a really patient person before this, and this process tested my patience for the better, like because now because it forced me to take my time. You know what I mean? Because I didn't have like a month where I could just go in the studio and sit and record and do nothing else. So I don't know if it alleviated the fears, but it definitely sort of made me sit down and just relax. Because
right.
Sai, there's nothing you can do while you're in Japan. You just gotta wait until you get back to LA to fix that, or you gotta wait till you get back to LA to put the guitar there, or you gotta wait till you get back to LA to record the violin or whatever. So I think it just made me a better person, though, because now I have the patience of a freaking guru.
What feeling kind of came over you when you realized, hey, this project is done, this is a finished product?
That's generally it's a very sort of euphoric feeling, because after you record all the songs and you mix all the songs and then you sequence everything, and then you listen back to a couple of different sequences. When you hit that sequence that is going to be the final product, it's just a really beautiful feeling. I was just really proud of my effort and proud of the songs, and the whole album told a story that I hadn't told of myself before, and I was like, wow, this is going to be, I hope this is going to be something that people get, and I hope this is going to be something that people understand is thoroughly and authentically me. It's a really proud moment.
What were some of the initial reactions that you've gotten from other people, whether it was fans or other musicians, in regards to the final product?
What were some of the reactions?
Yeah.
A lot of people just really, I don't even know what to say. A lot of people really, really liked it, and it made me really happy. Like Nicolay, whom you just spoke to, he wrote this really beautiful sort of, review is not the right word, but sort of what's the word I'm trying to think of? He just wrote this really beautiful story about how he met me, and then went on to talk about the album, and was saying what a great piece of work it was, and other musicians and other artists, Zoe, giving me props, and me and Zoe are we're like brother and sister, when it comes to music, and we're always calling each other up yo, I just learned how to do this, or, I just learned how to play this on blah, 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 So he was giving me props for just sitting down and playing, and he was like, I see you, Fastest, and that feels really good. A couple of my friends, they'll text me in pieces, girl, I'm just sitting here with Camelot, and I can't stop playing it or whatever. And that feels really good. That's really exciting.
When you have sort of relationships that you just described with either friends of yours or other artists, how important is it to have that sort of sense of community with fellow musicians in regards to the growth of your career?
Well, I don't know if this is. I'm sure it's not like this for everybody, but for me, the artist community means a lot to me, and my fellow artists whom I love and respect and adore, of course, when they give me props or whatever, that feels great. I would be lying if I said it didn't matter. You know what I mean? But there are some people who probably, they probably give no fucks at all, whatever. But no, it feels great, and it means a lot because they know, my fellow artists know more about what it means to make something like this than most people. You know what I mean? I think most people can imagine what it is, but my fellow artists know the sort of blood, sweat, and tears that we put into our projects. So when they give me a kind word here and there, or a big kind word in a public forum, even that means a lot. It means a whole lot, and especially as a girl, to have written and produced her own project in entirety. It means a lot to get good words from the guys, you know what I mean? Because, frankly, there's just not a lot of us doing that. There's not a lot of girls writing and recording and producing, their entire projects themselves. And it's not because we can't, but it's just because, frankly, we're not really encouraged to, And so I'm happy that I made that choice, and even happier that my fellow artists dig it,
That's a great topic that you just brought up in regards to women in music. What do you hope? Just as you as a self-producing musician, hope will happen in regards to music, whether it's on the mainstream or the independent levels, in regards to women making their own music and feeling comfortable in doing so.
Yeah, I just hope that, if I can be a small amount of encouragement to my fellow girls out there, a lot of times we're not encouraged to sort of take the reins of our creativity. And I don't know that, I'm not saying it's a big conspiracy or anything, it's just the way the world works. And, but I'm just here to sort of say, well, there's an alternative to that. You kind of can take your own reins if you know exactly what it is that you want to try. And even if you don't know, the point is to experiment and to figure it out. It's art. It's not perfection. So, I would hope that more girls kind of check my project out and see that, hey, you don't need 1,000 co-writers for real. Just read some books and learn how to love words and learn how to, languish in rhythms and learn how to, let your soul sort of dip and ebb and flow in a way that that reflects light and love and whatever you want to talk about, you know. I just hope that I can be that kind of, you know, encouragement to other girls, for sure.
And currently, you know, it looks like you're part of this sort of independent soul music route. Have you always been more of an independent artist? Have you swam the waters of, you know, signing with labels and whatnot in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I was signed to a label, Kelly, way back in the day, like '99. I was signed to Hollywood Records, and I did an album with them, and then they released one single, and then they didn't release the album, and then they like flipped the entire staff, and they were like, well, let's revisit the Cy Smith project, and then I sort of revamped the album from, you know, like a year, 2 years ago, and redid it. I don't know, and it was just such a monstrosity, like the way they kill creativity in some of these machines, especially when it comes to black music, is just unfortunate and disheartening. And I was released from that situation and was completely jaded because, you know, I had written some really great songs and recorded some really great stuff with some really wonderful people, and I was looking forward to putting that out there. And so it took me maybe a year or two to sort of find my grounding, and maybe around 2001 it was. I gathered up like 5 songs and just manufactured 1,000 CDs. You know, it was just a 5-song EP called One Like Me, and I didn't have any plans for it, and there was no independent soul music scene back then. I just put that out, and I was selling a lot of them, and I was doing little shows in LA, and I was like, wow, there's actually a scene for this.
Yeah.
Maybe I should, you know, maybe I should really take a hard look at maybe doing a whole album. And it wasn't until 2005 that I recorded and released Cyberspace Social. And again, this was like towards the beginning of this sort of indie independent soul music movement. There weren't that many of us in LA. I could probably name us on one hand. You know, it was like Kim Hill, me, you know, Medusa. Like there weren't a lot of us.
Right.
Soul of John Black. There was just a handful of us. But there were a lot of people who wanted to hear it, and you know, and the music wasn't localized to LA. You know, I was able to do shows in different cities, and I was like, wow, this is a scene, you know. And that was when I really sort of said, I can do this myself. Like, why am I even trying to be on a label? Fuck labels. Like, I can totally do this.
When you're, you know, making that transition from this, you know, terrible experience being signed to a label into, you know, finding some footing on an independent level, you know, what did you do to sort of make that transition, and what did you attribute sort of like those early little success of selling the CDs to?
The transition for me wasn't something I had a choice in. You know, I was like thrown in the pool, like,
Right.
You're not on our label anymore. Goodbye. You know, and and I had never really had the comforts of the machine working in my favor anyway. So I had never gotten used to any sort of luxury or any sort of support system. That, frankly, that label didn't want anything to do with black music in the first place. I don't even know why they had a department, you know, that was supposed to cater towards urban development, because that wasn't something they wanted to do. And I think the small successes, were attributed to just sort of me being resourceful and saying, you know, if I can't get into a club, like if a club won't book me to play somewhere, because I had a hard time getting booked at clubs in LA because what I was doing wasn't really, you know, it wasn't on the radio or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's hard for for R&B acts or whatever you want to call it, soul acts, to get booked anywhere. Like, if you're an indie band, you can just walk into a place and get booked like it ain't nothing. But if you are an R&B or a soul act, you got to show previous numbers. You got to have a draw. You got to, you know what I mean? So in those cases where I couldn't get booked or whatever, I would just I went to a small coffee shop called Lucy Florence, and Ron and Richard let me put on a little monthly thing there. And it was just sort of me just being dogged and not giving up. Like, so if they won't let me in, then I'll build my own place, was basically my thinking,
Right.
And then I'll make room for other people to come into my space, So my monthly venue at this little coffee shop became a showcase that I put on every month where I presented other artists, not just myself, and not only singers or musicians. I had dancers come do choreography pieces. I had poets. I had comedians. You know what I mean? It was just a space because I guess I saw the need for other girls like me who just wanted to be seen somewhere, And then other artists, I think we look out for each other more than people think, So like Frank McComb put me on the road with him, where he had me sort of opening for him, like in Japan at the Blue Note scene down there, and like Geno Young, like anywhere there were artists whom I knew, we kind of looked out for each other. You know what I mean? So if Geno had something going on in Dallas, I would go down there and do stuff. If I had something going on in LA, I'd tell him to come out, let's do something together. I'd go to DC, work out with Wes Felton and and those guys. There was just this sort of unwritten network of us, sort of underground railroad of of indie soul artists that helped each other get to freedom.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
When with being an independent artist for so long, to anybody who is whatever their craft is, whether they're a singer, a poet, an artist of any kind, what sort of like actionable items that's been a part of your career do you feel like anybody that's listening to this right now can apply to their own lives?
Oh my goodness. Let me see. Give me an example of what you mean by this.
Just like sort of like what your just sort of like lessons, things that you regularly do in your career that have been helpful with progressing it, and things that you don't need to it's not necessarily tied to one sort of genre of art that people can apply to their own lives.
Okay, yeah. I mean, well, one thing, it's not cute to be late. It never has been. So I try not to ever be late. And for that, really being on time means being early. I think everybody can apply that, no
Right.
matter what it is that they're in. If they are looking to excel and get ahead, rule number one, be early. If you're not early, you're probably late. So be early for everything. It sounds like common sense, Kelly, but like, damn it, look like a star all the time. Like, look beyond presentable. Look like a bona fide star everywhere you go. And I mean, like, I don't mean you have to wear 6-inch heels and rocking leather jeans or whatever every day, but you would just be surprised at how many people come out of the house looking like they just gave up. And and if you want to be taken seriously, I think you should look the part in everything that you do. And I think that can be applied in every situation. Ambition is not a dirty word. I think that is too something that that we should that people can apply. As long as you can be ambitious without stepping on people. You know, you can be ambitious and still reach back and pull other people up. Like I don't think that people realize that, like especially women, that ambition is not a dirty word. And then always be a student. Always learn. Say as little as you can while taking in the information. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room with other singers and like a music director is trying to teach a part, and while he or she is teaching the part, they're singing it. But I'm like, how can you learn it if you're opening your mouth and making noise? Like,
Right.
You have to be quiet and actually take in the part, you know. And this goes for musicians too. Like, you can't be playing on top of somebody trying to teach you the part. Like, just be quiet for a second and listen and take it in before you spit it back out, you know. And I think that not only applies to music. I mean, that's been something I've been doing my whole life, you know. But yeah, if those little life lessons can help, I hope they do.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you just said, you know, there's this idea that I heard about on another podcast where it's basically like your first impression starts before you even enter the room. And that's
Yep.
something that everybody should think about.
Yep, absolutely. It happens before you even leave. It happens before you even enter the building. It happens when you walk out of your door. You know what I mean? It really does. And it you know, how you carry yourself and how you treat other people, it reflects right back on you, you know, like an instant reflection, you know.
As an artist who is independent and a black woman, is there anything about, you know, women and even women of color in the music industry that people, you know, kind of think is a myth? And is there anything you would say to any young girls coming up that would sort of, you know, demyth all these ideas that are kind of put out there?
I think it's a myth that women don't work together well, and that, you know, women are sort of catty and always scrapping for little chunks of crumbs, but that's not true at all. Most of the women, and especially the women of color, but just all of us, all the women I know in music are like some of the most dopest, dynamic, and sharingest people I have ever met. You know what I mean? Like, and I think we look out for each other way, way, way more than people give us credit for. I wouldn't even be in this game had it not been for another sister who, you know, many, many years ago pulled me into basically her audition for Whitney Houston and said, you should check her out too. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even be here if it hadn't been for her, you know. Women are definitely generous and sharing and caring, and the industry is not that sort of cutthroat thing that people tell you, at least not peer-to-peer. That cutthroat thing happens, but I think it's more on an executive to artist level than anything else, and an executive to executive level. But in artist spaces, we tend to look out for each other. Yeah.
How important is it to have your male counterparts in the music industry be supportive of the women?
It's very important. I mean, you know, if we're out here fighting for equality and only half of us are fighting for it, you know, we'll never get it. You know, and that goes across the board for any sort of marginalized group. You know, it takes everybody to fight for equality for it to happen. And again, like, I've had some really fantastic men who pulled me along at a very young age and said, hey, let me show you how to do this, or let me show you how to do that. And and I wouldn't be here without them. Like, I really got my start learning how to sort of craft songs and stuff with a producer named Sauce from Something for the People. Do you remember that group?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first moved to LA, somebody hooked me up with Sauce, and he really showed me the ropes. And it was no funny business. Like, you know what I mean? It was none of that, the things that you hear about producers and messing with girls, and like he was just being an awesome brother, and just took me in and showed me how to do stuff. And I would never have gotten, learned as much as I did in such a small amount of time without him. And so yeah, it's really important that guys fight the good fight and support us, just as much as girls do.
When you think back, from the beginning of your career, how do you feel like you've both progressed as a music artist and as a person?
Ooh. Well, a lot of times, like a lot of my experiences that I've had, I was so young, that like I was oblivious to a lot of things as they were happening in real time. And it didn't occur to me until, sometimes years later, what had just happened. You know what I mean? So I think as I have really started to mature, I'm really starting to appreciate things in real time, and I'm really starting to be super present, as opposed to how I was at 23 when I was just sort of like, la 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 la, I'm not saying Whitney Houston, but there was a bus. Look at that, my attention span, relative to what's going on in the here and now has really grown for the better, and I'm really starting to appreciate things in real time, and I think that too shows itself in the music. I think that the things that I strive to achieve musically are way different now than they were at 23 when I was just trying to sing, really crisp and deliberate riffs, or, you know what I mean? Or really punch this line, whereas now I'm more trying to let an entire arc build. Do you know what I mean? Arc A-R-C and Arc A-R-K. Like, I want a story to be told, and I want to bring people on board with me as the journey goes, That's definitely something that comes with maturity. And, as you grow and you start to see the bigger picture, then your strokes become a little more broad. Do you know what I mean? And you're not just painting, you're not just coloring in one page in a coloring book. You're coloring an entire globe,
With, building this art currently, what do you feel like the future has in store for you with your art and your career?
The future is always surprising me. And so I have no idea what the future has in store. I know that I just want to build, I don't necessarily, and I never have necessarily, wanted to see myself like as this huge, big superstar. What I've always wanted, though, was to leave a legacy of art that, 50 years from now, maybe even 100 years from now, I can be like even a tiny tidbit of like musical history where somebody goes, man, but there was this chick, Cy Smith, back in the day. You know what I mean? Like, the way we sort of dig into the great jazz players and the great jazz singers, but then some of us dig into the bands and go, but there was this one guy, you know what I mean, that played the clarinet, and that guy. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So I hope that I can even make an impact like that, where my legacy might not necessarily be one of mega stardom, but one of just a micro sort of capsule that somebody says she played a part in the building of blank, whatever that next phase is. You know what I mean? In the sort of musicology sense of what the next role in soul music will be.
Right. Yeah, it's been great talking with you, and I always like to end my interviews on the podcast with the same question, and I did send it out to you early on to think about it. And that question is, who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview that would have some great stories?
Who? Zoe? Have you interviewed him?
No, I haven't. He's kind of on my list of people that I haven't interviewed for my podcast that I'll definitely want to interview.
He would have some great stories, and he has played figuratively prominently in the last few years of what I've been doing. And yeah, that's my brother. He's a great dude.
Oh yeah, I've known him since he was first started. I probably have his first release somewhere.
Wow, yeah. Yeah. And also Geno Young. I don't know if you're hip to him, but he and I went to Howard together.
Okay.
Like, we were at Howard it was me, Geno, Eric Roberson. Like, we were all there at the same time. I think Taraji Henson was there at the same, like, there was a big artistic group of people, and I wasn't even in the School of Fine Arts, but then Geno went on to do like solo albums, and then he was the music director for Erykah Badu during the whole Mama's Gun era. He would have some really great stories.
All right, great. Yeah, those are both some great suggestions. Yeah, it was good talking with you. I'm glad we were able to connect. If anybody wants to check out your music, get more information about you online, where can they go?
The easiest place to go would be SaiSmith.com, and everything is like right there. My music, and then my online store, and anything they want is right there.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for taking time out to chat with me.
Oh man, it was no problem. It was a pleasure, actually.
All right, great. And that was my interview with Sai Smith. Go and pick up that new album, Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete, today. It's really awesome. Now on to the Fresh of the Word, Fresh Pick of the Week. And this episode's pick is the newest album, Death Don't Always Taste Good, from the London-based production outfit, Ivy Lab. Ivy Lab has shot to the forefront of experimental bass music, holding no boundaries with any of their productions. The aspects of their music that shine the most is the way that they're able to take ideas from various genres, whether it be hip-hop, drum and bass, soul, or bass music, and just take the best and also underlying similarities in all of those styles and mold them together into something really heavy. They find a way to breathe new life even into samples that you may have heard before. So go ahead and check out that new album, Death Don't Always Taste Good. And like always, all the links to everything we talked about in this podcast will be in the show notes for this episode. You can always go to the Fresh of the Word website at freshofthepodcast.com and share any links that you might see on the website on any of your social media. You can subscribe to Fresh of the Word at Apple Podcast, Stitcher Radio, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Google Play, and TuneIn. Just search Fresh of the Word and it'll come up. And please leave a rating and a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. And if I do see you leave something, I'll definitely read it on a future episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KellyOmegaFresh, and at Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And then you can also follow Fresh is the Word on social media, on Twitter at FITW Podcast, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, at Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast, and on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Fresh is the Word Podcast. Like always, thank you for listening. Enjoy yourselves. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.